Okay, Oscar Nuts, it's prediction time at Gold Derby. We've seen almost all of the major contenders right now, and we are with Chris Beachum, our managing editor, our executive editor, Paul Sheehan. I'm Tom O'Neill, and I want to just take our managing editor, Chris Beachum, and shove him out there on the stage and have you show off for us here, Chris, because you are well known in Hollywood as an Emmy expert. I would say the Emmy expert in all of America, including anybody that they could put forth at the TV Academy. But more and more, I'm being astounded by the award insights you have about the Oscars, too. And we were just at the screening of Joy the other night, and you were spouting your statistics off and right and left. And so I just want to have you now set up the Best Picture race for us by answering this question. What movies can win, not will win, but what in an alternate universe scenario A, B, C can actually win? Go for it.
Well, I think there's still several. I think this is a very fun year. It reminds me of the Argo year. I mean, the last couple of years, it's been down to like two things, by this point. But that Argo year, I still remember Critics' Choice Awards, the first televised awards of that season, and all of those different movie people were at their tables, and we still didn't know what was going to win. And Argo won. I remember just gasping, going, "Okay, wow, I wasn't expecting that."
Right, but then
we all thought Lincoln.
Oscar nominations, and then all kinds of other kooky things happen, and of course, what's his name didn't get nominated for Best Director, Affleck at the Oscars, so there were wild cards galore. Yeah,
I think Spotlight is the one that's jumping out to me right now. It's that movie that we all saw, quite a few weeks ago. The public is just now seeing it, but that movie that you go, okay, that's really good. Let's see how all the other ones stack up. And then as they come out, and you're ambivalent about some, and you don't like some, and you like some, it's just that movie that nobody seems to hate. And
okay,
sometimes that's what you need.
Strikes against it though, using our common theories of awardsology. Number one, it's not going to have the most nominations, or will it? And number two,
no.
It's a movie about journalists, and no movie about journalists has ever won before.
Well, that's a couple of good points, but we've had movies recently that didn't have a ton of nominations. How many did Argo have? It only won for, screenplay, editing, and movie? So I could see that happening. I mean, it's not a movie that's going to get a lot of tech nominations, but you don't expect that going in. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Tom McCarthy, and we're going to talk about director in a little while. But Spotlight, to me, is the one that's jumping out right now. I'll be very surprised if several critics groups don't push it out front.
Paul, pipe in here.
Well, I just think, like Chris, it's Spotlight. It's not the best movie of the year, but it's probably in the top 2 or 3 for everyone. And when they vote for Best Picture, they've got to rank all the nominees. So you need passion to get the nomination, but then you need to be the consensus film to win. When they're doing all that counting, you just need to sort of stay in the race, and eventually, as all the other contenders fall away, all the nominees, so Spotlight, you love Joy, and then you like Spotlight. You love Carol, and then you like Spotlight. Like, if it gets all those number 2 votes of films that fall away, it ends up being the winner. So I think that, and those 2 movies I mentioned, both female-driven, and with an Academy that's 3/4 men, they don't have a chance. But I do wonder about The Revenant, because right now at Gold Derby we're predicting it's going to lead with 9 nominations, as will Carol, and Spotlight's going to have 6. Why not The Revenant to win? I mean, a testosterone-driven picture. It's probably got the winning Best Actor performance from DiCaprio, maybe Tom Hardy for supporting, cinematography. Couldn't Revenant do it?
It can it, Chris?
Oh, I think it could. I think it's awfully violent. I don't know. I don't know if that's going to pan out with some of the more squeamish voters. Very male-driven, obviously. So
70% of the Academy is male. It's been 10 years since we've had a female perspective movie win. Normally that's a good thing. Also, what's good about The Revenant is it's the biggest picture in terms of canvas, in terms of nominations, in terms of Leo, and the reputation of its director, who won last year for Birdman. It's got all that going for it.
Yeah, I
epic.
agree.
Yeah.
I do think that actually hurts it in a way. There won't be a have to, or even maybe even a want to give Inarritu a fourth Oscar win in 12 months.
But that's where you see the splits now, especially the preferential ballot for Best Picture has now caused these splits between director and picture where they used to go hand in hand almost every single year. It was a shock when they didn't. Now where it's the exception when the director and the picture both win. So what about The Martian? I mean, there is somebody, Sir Ridley Scott, overdue director, never won. 3 nominations, directed Gladiator, which won Best Picture. He didn't win that year. He's had a couple of other nominations. But The Martian, a popular popcorn picture. I mean, it's going to, it's already well over 250 million. And worldwide, it's a huge hit as well. Could that be the consensus choice?
I think it's got a lot going for it. I agree with, I believe Chris is. Where do you stand on Best Director, Paul? I'm picking Ridley Scott to win.
Funny on Ridley Scott, too. It was like 6 or 7 weeks ago, I did a forums thread that said, am I crazy to think Ridley Scott won Best Director? And to a person, almost everybody said yes. And now everybody's kind of jumping on that bandwagon of maybe this will happen for him.
But Chris, talk about why you think that. I mean, this fellow isn't just a director. He's a producer of films and television. I mean, it's the depth and breadth of his involvement in projects, including a producer on Will Smith's vehicle, Concussion, coming out at Christmas.
And as Tom always likes to say, sometimes people just have an IOU in their hands. And he did not win Best Director for Gladiator, and he was not a producer on Gladiator when it won for Best Picture way back. So, Oscar voters are more savvy than maybe some of the other groups out there, and I think they will. I think his studio and his people will keep reminding them, beating them over the head with the fact that, hey, this man is almost 80 years old and he's never won an Oscar, and you're looking at a really stellar career minus a few blunders here and there.
I was talking to members of his camp the other day, Scott, who was saying that he's against having that be the thrust of his campaign out there in the field. But I was telling his camp, the Oscar consultants behind him, saying, just go for it. He doesn't have to know. Just you get that word out there, and that because the thing that everybody forgets is it's the story behind the candidacy of something that is more important than the movie. In other words, Catherine Bigelow getting revenge on her ex-husband was more important than The Hurt Locker when it was up against Avatar and James Cameron. That kind of narrative is what you need to win, and it is what Ridley's got going for him, and the word's just got to get out there.
Right. I think, Tom, with you predicting Meryl Streep for Iron Lady, the reason being they finally wisened up and conveyed that she had not won in almost 30 years. You surveyed most people, and they thought she had 3 or 4 already. And it's the same thing with Ridley Scott. I think the Gladiator win confuses most Oscar voters, and they think that he has an Oscar. Yes. So there is that need to drive that narrative. And then what does Hollywood love? They love a comeback. And, the last couple of films he's made have been misfires, like that Exodus travesty. So the fact that he, at almost 80, pulled together this hugely ambitious film, told the story so well. I mean, and to get the critics to embrace a popcorn picture like that, and then obviously the audiences are loving it as well. And you've got Matt Damon, a charmer. And I think Ridley Scott, what he's got going for him, which some of the other directors don't, is that he himself, he's a good campaigner. He's charming. He's not off-putting. He doesn't, offend people with his opinions like some of the other potential nominees in Best Director. So.
The other thing about him too, Tom and Paul, I think sometimes if you just kind of look at the landscape down the road, the schedule, I think he's never won a Globe. I could totally see the foreign press going for him. He's never won a BAFTA award. I could certainly see them going for him. And remember, at DGA, most of that group is not film directors but TV directors, and he's very well thought of on the producing side for TV. He does The Good Wife, He's had several movies and miniseries over the years. I think he could get on a roll and just start winning all of those awards.
Mm.
The problem with it winning Best Picture is it's a popcorn picture. Rarely do they win anymore since the Oscar landscape has turned toward art house films ever since the VHS tapes and the DVDs came in, and Oscar voters could sit at home and prove how smart they are by voting for the more upper crust stuff. But Lord of the Rings did win, Titanic did win, popcorn pictures can go. The problem with The Martian for Best Picture is that it's more of like a one-man show, and they like ensemble things. It does have A-list stars. That's usually a requisite of what you need to win. It does have the warm, fuzzy feeling going for it, but it's got sci-fi as its curse. Yeah, there are no green aliens in it, but it is still sci-fi, and they're not going to go for that. Back to Spotlight for a second. Let me give you some points here that people never mention that are very, very important for its trajectory to win Best Picture. Number one, it does have the celebrity cast. Remember, in the old days, you needed to have a familiar stable of big stars like American Beauty had, or even Chicago had, for example, and that tended to help you win Best Picture. And Spotlight has, of course, a galaxy of big stars in it. And it has, it feels important in a way that The Revenant doesn't, and Joy doesn't. Birdman felt very important, and so did 12 Years a Slave, and Spotlight has that going for it. But even more than all of those things, let's look behind the campaign to see who's standing there. Two people. One, Tom Mortenberg, the president of Open Road Films, who was president of Lionsgate when Crash pulled off its upset. And look who his campaign manager is, Lisa Tayback, ex-Weinstein Lisa, who is, along with Cynthia Swartz and a few others, just the hungry dog, the mad scientist of brilliant Oscar campaignings. And she, of course, gave us the Weinstein wins for The Artist and King's Speech. And they are masterfully. Chris, you and I get a Spotlight dinner invitation every other day, don't we, or luncheon or something. Wherever we go, there's another Oscar event for that movie.
Yeah, they're really putting on a good campaign. A couple of things that you were saying there that made me think about, you always talk about people, especially Oscar voters, let's say, wanting to be on the winning team. They're watching that landscape all those weeks leading up. I could certainly see this movie winning SAG Ensemble. And while that doesn't always mean Best Picture, it does about half the time, and I think that helps. Also, being a true story, they got the support of all of these reporters and editors from the Boston Globe. They're out campaigning for the movie, the ones portrayed in the movie. I think that's helpful. It's not one of those movies that you get sometimes on these true stories where you get all the backlash of, oh, this wasn't true and that wasn't true, and what does the family of the person being portrayed even like this movie, that kind of thing. They all seem to be very much in favor of this movie.
Paul, thoughts?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, and I think that it's doing well as they Open Road. Congrats to them for just the release. It's building gradually. It's doing well every single week when I write up the box office report as it expands. They're doing a really good job of that. So I have to congratulate them for that, because that's another factor. I know it's not. We can mention The Hurt Locker and a few other films that it didn't do that well at the box office and still won. But I certainly think there's a film, that was out a couple of months ago, which is a wonderful film, Steve Jobs, that was right in the mix and top of everyone's list to win Best Picture, and for Fassbender to win, and Aaron Sorkin. And then it was perceived to be one that didn't do well because they opened it so wide. And now it's sort of at the bottom of our top 10 and falling off, probably, to be replaced by...
me off, because that's one of my favorite movies of the year, if not my favorite. Hey, I have this kooky theory. Let me throw this one out there. If Spotlight is All the President's Men, and it is, which was the presumptive winner of Best Picture back in our bicentennial year, 1976, well, about 40 years ago, this little movie called Rocky came along, and the LA Film Critics, as a lark, just named it Best Picture. They thought, oh, what the hell, let's put ourselves on the map. They were a new critics organization. They did it for strategic reasons and just for fun and to be mischievous. And boy, it took off, of course, and that was a great example of the Derby at work, of where the precursor awards affect the awards later on. We have Rocky VII in the mix, and it is a
called Creed. Called Creed. Just so
Creed. Thank you. Yes, Creed. And I know it's preposterous to think it can win. It's a different kind of thing entirely.
No, it's not preposterous, Tom.
For that movie. If there's just nowhere else to go here for the voters, is it preposterous to think that Creed could win, you guys? Who wants to jump?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not preposterous at all. First of all, you've got the narrative of Sylvester Stallone. Talk about the Hollywood redemption story. You know, that he writes the script of Rocky, refuses to sell it to a studio unless he gets to be in it, right? They wanted to buy it and put Ryan O'Neal or James Caan in it. He's in it, huge hit. Then things are going okay for him, and then he sort of gets Rambo-ized and does Rocky 3, 4, 5, 6. That's, you know, he becomes a Razzie winner, a perpetual Razzie winner. So now, at close to 70, he's lined up for that Veteran Achievement Award, otherwise known as Best Supporting Actor. Gives a wonderful performance in this picture. But also, last year, the Academy was chastised for not recognizing films with African Americans in them. This year, you know, Creed is from Ryan Coogler, who did Fruitvale Station a couple of years ago. The star of Creed, Michael B. Jordan, was in Fruitvale Station. I mean, this would be a wonderful way for the Academy to show that they do believe in diversity. It's kind of that hybrid of the old and the new. You know? So I think absolutely it could win. It made over $40 million. It was it was made for only $37 million, so they already know they're gonna break even on the thing. But I think this thing's gonna gallop. I think it's gonna be the blind spot. I think you're gonna see it go up to 150 million, 175 million.
Absolutely, I agree.
Chris,
any thoughts here?
I'm not buying it as much. I'm gonna if the Globe is 6, then I will move it into my predictions.
It doesn't have snob appeal. I don't even have it in my top 10. But I mean, of all the crazy things that could happen here, I'm saying that it could happen. Or Straight Outta Compton, let's say it wins some of these Critics Awards. We're chatting right on the eve of the New York Film Critics here, right after National Board of Review. We haven't yet heard from L.A., so we don't know what they're going to contribute to the Derby. But there's also Critics' Choice, of course, and Globe and SAG nominations coming up. Hateful Eight, we have to say we have not seen. We're seeing that in a couple of days. That's the only one of this group. But the early word is that it's not Best Picture winner. I don't know if that's true. We'll have to size it up ourselves.
It's really,
back to you. What else can win? What other possibilities?
Well, I'll tell you the movie that, as you and I have been at parties, or I've been at parties and events, and we always try to chat up, you know, Oscar voters or Hollywood Foreign Press voters, just to see what they're thinking about. The two movies I've heard the most often mentioned, when I just say, what was your favorite this whole year? They'll say Spotlight, some of them, and they'll say Brooklyn. I don't think Brooklyn can win Best Picture, but I do think it has really moved up the charts with me in terms of several of the categories.
Right. And we hear Room, too, right?
Room,
Chris?
yeah, we hear Room a lot.
Yes, exactly.
I interrupted you. Sorry there. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say just about the Hateful Eight. It's the biggest film, right? 187 minutes, including a 12-minute intermission, shot in 70mm Panavision. It's certainly ambitious. But about those small little movies, Brooklyn and Room, you know, Brooklyn, I think even they're surprised how it resonates with men. It's not just sort of a weepy for women, and it's because everyone's moved away from home. Everyone has had that journey in their own way, whether it's just going off to college. But most people have moved cities, so it doesn't have to be that Irish immigrant experience from the early 1950s. Everyone can identify with it in some way, and it's so well made because it's sentimental, but it's not mawkish. And while people have seen it already, the ones that haven't, that are going to watch, I think it'll play very, very well on the screener. And imagine if you're popping Brooklyn in over the Christmas holidays and you're missing your mother back there in Topeka and stuff, and you start crying, you know.
I buy what you're saying, Paul. That movie is about a woman who moves to the U.S. from Enniscorthy, Ireland, which is where my father's mother is from, and she moved to New York with her sister at the age of 16, and they mopped floors and hospitals and things. It was the whole immigrant experience. That was my granny up on the screen when I saw it. It does have a lot of love. I don't think it feels important enough or cool enough to win, but it's going to get a ton of nominations, you betcha.
I think Paul brings up a good point there, too, about these screeners. The smaller movies, the ones that play really well on a home screen, I think, this time of year, or December, early January, when people are voting, especially Oscar voters, that really helps out. If it is a big monster of a movie in terms of, it should be seen on a big screen, sometimes that gets penalized a little bit just watching it at home.
Bridge of Spies is going to have a boatload of
right.
Nominations, right, Chris? How many? Or Paul?
Yeah, we're looking at, Paul did the numbers on that one the other day. What was the number?
Just like 7. So we're saying Revenant and Carol at 9, Martian, Bridge of Spies at 7, and also we've got to mention Mad Max. But we'll talk about Bridge of Spies first. But that's it. Mad Max is at 7 as well. This is Steven Spielberg, Tom Hanks. They really knocked it out of the park with this one, I think. Great reviews for it. As everyone reminded me when I wrote the item, I dared to say it was their best reviewed film since Saving Private Ryan, and everyone corrected me and said, what about Catch Me If You Can? I'd forgotten that because I was thinking in terms of the films that had resonated with Oscar voters. And, Oscar voters, many of them north of 65, they'll remember the incidents in Bridge of Spies. This isn't ancient history to them. They remember reading those headlines about the U-2 plane being downed and the exchange of prisoners. And it's so well crafted. It's taut. It's really suspenseful. Tom Hanks is wonderful in it. And then Mark Rylance gives that subdued performance as the Russian spy. This guy, you can see why he won 3 Tony Awards. And I just think, the actors branch will certainly respect somebody like him. It definitely is in the hunt. But I gotta, just to shift slightly to Mad Max. I know I wrote an article dismissing the National Board of Review, saying they never get these things right, and they went with Most Violent Year last year, and they do a top 10 list, and they missed half of the Best Picture nominees. But what about Mad Max? I mean, it's huge box office. It did well with the critics, well over 90 on Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic. It's not going to probably win, but is it even going to be nominated for Best Picture?
It sure can be. Absolutely. Right, Chris?
No.
You don't think
Okay.
really? You're nuts, Chris. You are totally wrong.
It's going to get into all the tech, the tech categories, but we've seen movies like that before. They get into all the tech categories, and then they can't get into
we've seen a lot of really critically beloved popcorn pictures like Inception get in for Best Picture too, though. This is different. There's a strong rooting factor for this movie, and it has credibility. It's not on my list to get in. It's number 15 now on our experts list, but I think it's really in the hunt.
But I think that whether it's the National Board of Review, and you just never know what's going to happen with New York and LA, that George Miller has the same kind of narrative as Ridley Scott. Coming a senior citizen, and he helms this big, ambitious picture. Great.
At least he already has an Oscar, though.
Yeah. So,
other movies we need to talk about here. Inside Out could very well be nominated. They did nominate Toy Story 3 and what's the other one? Up in the Best Picture race. It is an exceptional animated film. It's very likely to be nominated. It's got a good shot at it anyway. The Big Short, this is the Paramount movie that they're angling to get in here. I heard from some New York Academy people over the last few days that they're really, really, really loving it, and the campaign's going strong for that. But I tend to think that if Paramount gets in, it may be for Anomalisa. That movie has such strong, passionate support. It's stop motion, stop motion, as in terms of animated fare. And if those passion votes get you in for Best Picture, I think that's really in the race. I know that it's a love it, hate it movie, but there's a lot of love for it.
Oh, yeah. Charlie Kaufman, I mean, that's absolutely... I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see one of the critics groups, maybe even if it doesn't win Best Picture, maybe it's in the top 2 or 3.
Right, right. And it was nominated for Best Picture at Indie Spirits. That was a nice surprise.
Yeah, that's right. So
one you did mention, Tom, that I've just moved into my top 10 in the past week, I think. When I counted up the number of nominations I had it down for, I went, wow, I didn't know it was going to get 6, 7 nominations, and that's The Danish Girl. I don't think it's going to win Best Picture, but when you look at production design, costume design, makeup, you got Eddie Redmayne, you've got Alicia Vikander. I mean, when you add up the nomination possibilities, it really could get into Best Picture.
Well, I think it's a slam dunk. Every HFPA member I've talked to said they're going to vote for it for Best Picture. It's getting in over there. What happens is we get bored of movies here. Steve Jobs, to use Paul's example from earlier in this chat, and everyone loves it, and then suddenly they turn on it and it sinks. That's what's happened to The Danish Girl. When we saw that film in Toronto, the reception was terrific. We didn't think we were seeing Best Picture, but we thought we might be seeing Best Actor, depending on how the year shakes out. And it was way up on our list, like 4 or 5 ranked in the Best Picture race. And, of course, it fell down to number 14 or 15 even before it opened. So nothing changed between Toronto and its opening. It was the same movie with the same reaction. There was no scorecard, let's say, a box office disappointment or whatever else they might want to tag it with. It was just that our pundits got bored with it. But you're right, Chris. They're wrong, and it will be in the Best Picture mix.
Which is, just to bring it all full circle, is why we pundits, who are all journalists, might be overestimating Spotlight.
Yes, because that's a movie about journalists. We have to take that into account, that journalists are especially crazy for selfish reasons, and we may be reading this race all wrong.
And then the other film that was in the Rocky year that did quite well at the Oscars, Network, Peter Finch as the mad TV news anchor. He beats Sylvester Stallone for Best Actor. Pat Chayefsky wins. Again, about the media. And, when it came to Best Picture, the Academy rejected that. You gave it 3 acting awards, but didn't give it Best Picture.
I'm rooting for Straight Outta Compton. It's one of my favorite films of the year. And if they're going to go for an African-American movie, I think was, of course, the big indie surprise of the year. It's about a revolution in the entertainment industry. It's the entertainment industry voting on this Oscar award. Just crazy about the movie. I think it's fantastic. I've watched it twice. Can't wait for my screener so I can watch it again. That's a message to you guys at Universal to hurry up and get it over here.
You know what I'm interested in on that one? I want to see how the Los Angeles film critics handle that one, because it's an LA driven movie, and I want to see if they embrace certain aspects of that.
Right. I think if it was just the post Cheryl Boone Isaacs Academy classes that were voting, Tom, it would win Best Picture. But I think it's up against a lot of Oscar voters that probably won't make it through more than 15 or 20 minutes of that.
Right, but those who do, and those who recognize what a masterwork it is, will champion it. That's what happened to it at the box office. All of a sudden, it exploded when people discovered it, and the word of mouth was sensational. So I'm kind of hopeful that gets into. Of course, we've only had, 9 nominations last year for Best Picture, 9 nominees, and then 8 the 2 previous years, am I right? So only about half of these movies we're talking about here are going to get in.
It was 8 last year, but we can have 10. You can have up to 10. So I think we'll certainly be watching and hoping it's 10, because it gives us that much more to talk about. Though, as people know, we only need one movie to talk about for an hour. So it would.
Especially if it stars Barbara Streisand, right? Anyway, final thought. Final thoughts here.
Gypsy.
We're going to wrap it up. What's that?
No, I was saying Gypsy for the Best Picture of 2020.
There we go. Right. Paul is a big Babs fan, if you can't tell. So let's. So we end here and then do acting separately as a.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that. We'll wrap up here, and I'm gonna send you guys a new link so we can continue this chat in a part 2. Thanks.
Okay.